Okay, and as you had noticed, there are two videos to this because a presentation got interrupted and it totally stopped. So moving forward, first branch is off the bronchial tree. Right side is more vertical. What would possibly explain that? And this is one of those aspects to where when we're doing other things rather than listening, that's what separates possibly having a very good understanding of this content and not. So it's just an observation possibly made, but why would this possibly be? We've talked about this in class before. Why is the right side more vertical? What is the name of this specific cavity right here? Starts with an M. And it's not on your paper. Say that again? Nope. So it's got two different pronunciations. Some people might say mediastinum, other people might say mediastinum. And the reason for that is it's how the heart sits within that cavity. It's more located to the left side. So then what is significant about the left lung? It's the same size as the right lung, but there's something really specific that differentiates the left lung from the right lung. Left side has 2 lobes, the right side has 3. So since the heart sitting in that mediastinum is further to the left as opposed to the right, that's why the right side is more vertical. So should something get lodged in the further past the bronchial tree, a doctor is probably going to look on the right side because that is more vertical than that of the left. Okay, moving forward. So this is a concept that goes all the way back to one of the very first things that you had learned, one of the very first concepts that you would have learned in biology when it comes to, let's say, cellular size. Why is it that multicellular organisms have small cells as opposed to large cells? And there's a various amount of reasons for that. But this would also explain why, why our cells are small in nature rather than being larger in nature. Okay, so everyone have this wrote down that wants it. Okay, so just think 1 year ago, probably in August, maybe late August, we would have learned about cellular structures. Okay. And why are our cells not made that large? Like, for instance, inside your, let's say, thoracic cavity and abdominal cavity, why not have about 4 or 5 cells within that cavity? That is one type of surface area, but this is maybe more accurate. Try and use some spatial orientation here. When it comes to surface area, does this have a larger surface area or all of these put together? On the right? That's correct, because once you start adding all of these little ones and start adding them together, it probably only would take maybe about 12 of these to get all the way around. So what happens is when you have smaller cells like this, you increase the surface area, not the volume. That's a little different, okay? But you increase that surface area. Also, when it comes to waste products, what might a waste product be that is filtered from cellular metabolism? The liver takes care of that for us. That's something that we had discussed last semester, a little more recent. We know, and that was mentioned up at your presentation up at SDSU. And the presenter, I believe it was, I almost said Mr. Hoth. I knew that wasn't right. Mr. Wagner said, so what's probably the major function of the liver then? And the young lady from S-Line, bam, came up with an answer just like that. And that's probably the most important function of the liver. Has something to do with enzymes. It modifies enzymes. It makes enzymes for us, okay? But also, what does the liver also do for us? It will secrete substances, that's true, but it also will filter urea from the bloodstream. Now, different types of organisms within the animal kingdom have to compensate for that. And let's say this is a bird egg, for instance. As that embryo is developing inside of a bird egg, it's going to start to accumulate waste products just like what we would. And what happens is our liver will take that urea out, filter it, send it to the bladder, and then, the kidneys, so it's more water soluble, then gets sent to the bladder, and then we get rid of it then. But what happens if you can't do that if you're within a shelled egg? Well, the man upstairs had designed them that as these embryos develop, that urea is converted to uric acid. And when that happens, it crystallizes, and it's a harmless substance. But just think, if urea is really toxic, that's a lot of toxic substances inside of a large cell. If you have lots of microcellular structures like this, not only is it easier to absorb sugars, oxygen, blood gases, it's also going to be much, much easier to pass those waste products off. And that's why when we talk about the capillary bed, that is what we're referring to here. Provides a very large surface area, okay, so that blood can be absorbed in exchange very easily, okay. Blood gases, not blood. Okay. So again, oxygen is not the only blood gas, carbon dioxide is the other, and that's what we're referring to here, okay. So what was the first thing that went through your mind? And this is one of the things that we could certainly tell by looking at, I believe it was the female up there with her lungs. The composition on the bottom was much different than that of the top. Why might that be? Yeah, she was a smoker. And what typically will happen to an individual's lung or lungs over time? What's that tissue going to do? Deteriorate's a better term, because rot means it's probably going to become soft. And in this case, what did that feel like with that lung then? Was it soft and spongy like it's supposed to, or was it pretty firm, almost like a rock? Yeah, it was probably pretty firm. That's right. So here's that term again. What's inside that mediastinum or mediastinum? Something we talked about last chapter. What would be in between the lungs? The heart, that's right. Okay. Where does that put us? I wanted to get possibly up to breathing, and I believe that's probably next. Lungs, encasing the lungs. Okay, so here's our breathing mechanisms. We'll get up to that, and then we'll stop there for today. Now, it says that it's smaller, but it's one of those aspects I don't think you'd be able to tell by just, in general, looking at it. But if that is the case, again, why is the right lung slightly larger than the left? It's because how it sits in the mediastinum. And is the heart further to the left or is the heart further to the right? Why are you correct, or why are you right? Well, because of the lobes and how it sits in the mediastinum, that, of course, taking up that extra space on the left side, which the heart does, that's why the left is going to be just a little bit smaller, and the right side is just a little bit larger. Now, when we think about respiration, do the lungs forcefully contract? When something contracts, what is causing a contraction? Bone tissue? Skin tissue? Muscular tissue does. So when we look at all of the tissue that's inside of these structures, okay, do the lungs expand by contraction, or is there something else causing that? There's something else causing that, and that's a specific muscle at the base of the lungs, which is what? Yeah, the diaphragm causes that, okay? Because the lungs are epithelial or skin tissue, okay? Not muscular tissue. The expansion of the lungs is due to the diaphragm, not the lungs themselves, because it, again, is just skin/epithelial tissue. Typically, when we talk about inflammation, okay, we don't refer to this as pleuritis, okay? I believe the proper term is maybe pleurisy. Is that something you may have run across in your...
I don't think so.
Okay. How is that class going, by the way? Is it done?
Yeah, I didn't have to take up the final because my grade was high.
Awesome. So how much of that do you think you really remember?
A lot.
Oh, okay. Is that unfortunate? Well, it served you your purpose for the time.
Yep.
Okay. And we hope that in the entire big picture that content is still there. Just like that file cabinet.
Right.
Are we just agreeing?
Yep.
Okay. Because I believe when we're talking about pleurisy, this fluid can get inflamed. Because anytime there's fluid somewhere in the body, it can become inflamed, even with mucus. That's why it's bronchitis, okay? And that's why inside of the spinal column or inside the brain, okay, there's a specific type of inflammation there, and it's an infection. So what type of fluid surrounds your brain and spinal cord? Starts with an M. Mediocre, that's an M. Myocardium,
That, no, cardium is probably like the heart.
yep, that's exactly. Myocardium is a type of muscular tissue of the heart. But if you have myocarditis, then that would be inflammation in that muscular tissue. But again, I understand this was last semester, but do we remember the type of fluid that can become infected encasing the brain and spinal cord? Starts with an M. Nope. Myo is going to be muscle of some sort. Menin something. Meningitis. So it's the meninges that become inflamed that causes meningitis. Okay? So if you have fluid somewhere, it can become inflamed and infected. That certainly would be the case here, and I believe it's called pleurisy. All right. So tomorrow we won't have a whole lot to do. We're past that of the vocal cords. So we'll talk about the inspiration, the expiration, and we are winding down fairly quickly. Okay. So yes, ma'am.
For the final exam, is it just going to be like these vocab words, or are you going to add in?
There's probably going to be more than that.
Can you give me some vocab list?
Why is that?
So you can like,
You remember all that stuff.
For this
Okay, we'll catch up to you next time.